Chica. So I have a series for you. It's going to be a 3-part series that's all about when to throw the 2-pound rule out the window when you're stabilizing in phase 3. So because I've had kind of a unique journey with the HCG protocol, I've learned that there really are times that you have to completely ignore that 2-pound rule, or you're just going to totally drive your body and yourself mad. So there's basically 3 scenarios that we will cover in these next 3 videos, helping you to see whether or not you fit one of those situations where you may have to stabilize outside of that 2-pound window. So the 3 scenarios we'll cover are: 1, if you did not eat the fruits and grissini during phase 2, or you rarely did. So we're going to go into that in this video. The second video will cover if you start a rigorous exercise program in phase 3. And this third scenario is if you find yourself just doing steak day after steak day after steak day, and it's been, you know, I'm going to exaggerate a little here, but 10 steak days in a row, and your weight, just won't go down or stay down. So those are the 3 scenarios that we'll talk about, and hopefully that'll help you guys figure out how to stabilize in a way that's good for you guys. Because really the point here that I'm trying to help everyone see is really that you stabilize, not necessarily that it be in some magic window. There's definitely times when you can stabilize within that window, but when it comes to these specific scenarios we're going to talk about, it can often be not only difficult, but sometimes pretty much impossible, and you can actually end up kind of hurting yourself or working against yourself by trying to force it. So the first scenario is if you did not eat the P2 fruits and or grissini while you were in phase 2. Now, most people don't eat the melba and grissini for the most part. Most of them don't. And many of them are still kind of able to stabilize around that 2-pound mark. However, if you also did not eat the phase 2 fruits, this is going to be for you. And the reason I'm mentioning it is because that's something that I chose to do on more than one round. And we're going to talk about why that changes things. And it's definitely not to scold or anything like that, like it was a bad thing. Definitely not. I've done it. I would do it again. I had good reasons for it, and I felt great doing it that way. But what happens is if you don't eat the fruits and melba on phase 2, that ends up equating to an artificially low LDW or LIW, that last injection weight, that you're trying to stabilize close to. So let's talk about what that means exactly. So all the weight that you thought you lost in phase 2 when you weren't eating the fruit in melba, most likely you lost more weight on the scale when you didn't eat those things than you would have if you had kept them in. Now, the bad news is that you didn't really lose more weight or fat, most likely, than if you had just kept the fruits in. What happens is when you don't eat the fruits and the melba and stuff, it makes the diet really, really low carb. And so usually what ends up happening is your body actually taps into your glycogen stores for some of its fuel. And glycogen is basically just water that is naturally stored, in your muscles and in your liver. Your liver doesn't hold a lot of glycogen, but all of your muscles holds that water. So a little bit of that weight loss that you had on phase 2 is most likely going to be partially these glycogen stores. Now, the thing to remember is your body, like you would not want to live perpetually having depleted glycogen stores. Like you don't want to have to live that way. Like as soon as you ate carbs, if you were eating super low carb for a while and then you had a bowl of rice or something, like your body would instantly, just naturally, as a part of the way your body naturally works, would refill those glycogen stores, and that would result in a gain, a perceived gain on the scale. But the important thing to note here is that that's not like fat, like you didn't gain fat. Oh, so many airplanes. I can't wait. I'm moving, you guys. I'm so glad because I live right next to an airport, and every time I try to make a video outside, it's so frustrating because every 5 minutes there's like a really loud airplane that goes by, and I have to stop in the middle of some awesome thought. Okay, so a little bit of that weight loss that you had in phase 2 is most likely that a small part of that is glycogen stores. And the thing to remember about the glycogen stores is that your body is going to naturally want to refill it as soon as there is any carbs available. So if you're on a super low carb diet, for a period of time, as soon as you have a bowl of rice or a potato or anything like that, your body's going to just automatically refill those glycogen stores. It's just a natural thing that our body does, and it's healthy. And so it's not something you can really prevent outside of just not eating any carbs. But it doesn't really make sense to do that because these glycogen stores are not fat. And they're really beneficial as well because glycogen stores are some of the things that your body taps into when you work out, and it gives you quick energy. It's something that your body is able to access very quickly and use up. And that's also one of the reasons that if you work out like super hard and deplete all of your glycogen stores, you can go and have like a pretty big meal right after a workout. It's like a prime time because your body will use like all of those calories to refill your glycogen stores. At least that's how I understand it. So like you could typically get away with, eating a higher carb meal after a workout versus, many hours later. So anyway, just a little bit info on that. But anyway, so what that means is when your body refills glycogen stores naturally, that's going to translate into a gain on the scale. But remember, that gain is not fat. It's just basically that water that's being stored in your muscles, your liver, and it's healthy. It's a totally healthy thing. It looks good on your body as well. Sometimes, like, when I would finish a round of HCG without the fruits and Melba, there's kind of a, I don't want to say gaunt look, but kind of a just really super lean look that I would have that would go away pretty fast as soon as my glycogen stores are refilled. Whereas like now that I eat a normal amount of carbs and I'm doing my workouts, there's a plumpness to my muscles, and that's that glycogen storage that's going on. So anyway, this is all a good thing. But if you're not aware that this is what can happen if you don't eat the fruits and Melba on phase 2, you can find yourself in that place where you can't seem to stabilize in that 2-pound window. And that's because in order for your body to refill those glycogen stores, it's going to take more than 2 pounds, basically, of weight on the scale to do that. And that would be different than if you had eaten the fruits and the Melba. In that case, your body would have never really tapped into your glycogen stores because it wouldn't have needed to. And so in that case, it's like you already have that. So whatever weight that you end up at your LDW, is your weight. There's nothing like artificially low about it. So then when you go into stabilize, it's going to be seemingly easier to stabilize, and you will usually be able to stay, around that 2-pound window, because you're not having that extra water, that your normal body would normally have. You already have that. So I hope that makes sense. So in a nutshell, what I'm basically saying is that if you don't eat fruits and Melba in P2, you most likely have an artificially low LDW, and you most likely will need to stabilize higher than the 2-pound window. And it's just one of those things that you'll probably need to accept and work with. Exactly how much higher that will be, I can't necessarily tell you. I've ended up stabilizing 5 to 7 pounds higher than my LDW. And I know, like, at the outset that can seem like it sucks, because you spend all those weeks on P2, every pound counts. It's like you look at every 0.2, every pound. Another airplane, am I surprised? So it's like every 0.2, every pound that you lost, you hang on to that, and that's kind of what helps keep you going through this difficult protocol. And so it can be disappointing when you get to the end and realize that a little bit of that weight wasn't like real fat, wasn't real weight, and that you'll have to get that part back. But it's really better to just accept the scenario, and in the future, you know, now that you're watching this video, you'll even know that in advance for future rounds if you do that, so that you can kind of plan ahead and expect in your mind, like, okay, I already know that a small portion of this weight loss I'm going to have to gain back right away. So I hope that that helps. And the other thing that this helps us to realize is that there are times when doing phase 2 without fruits and Melba are a good idea. In fact, I'm going to make a whole video about that also in the future. But you wouldn't want to do that for the purpose of losing more weight. Because as you can see, while you would probably lose more weight by not eating the fruits and Melba, it's not like it would be real weight. So that would be pointless to do that because it's just going to come right back on. But there are definitely other good reasons to do that. And the other thing I want to clarify here real quick is that when I'm talking about people who leave out P2 fruits and Melba, I'm saying that with the knowledge that those calories from like those fruits and stuff are being replaced by something else. So that in general, you're still eating close to the 500 calories. That's how I did it. A couple of my rounds, I didn't do fruits because of sugar addiction and all that. I just found it so much easier. But what I did was I replaced those calories from what I would have had in the fruits with extra vegetables and or 0% fat-free Greek yogurt, the Faye brand. So that's what I would do. So I'm not talking about taking out the fruits and just eating far less calories. In general, that's not a good idea. There's definitely days where you may be, you know, so unhungry that you eat less than 500, and that's okay. And I even have a whole video about that as well. I'll link to it in this article. But you definitely want to eat to hunger, and in general, that's going to mean you'll probably be having most of the 500 most of the time. So yeah, definitely, I don't want to mislead anyone here. So it's just if you decide to replace those fruits with something technically lower carb. So that's the scenario that can happen. And like I said, I don't know exactly how many pounds outside that 2-pound window that you'll have to stabilize. But what I really recommend is that you just definitely stick to P3, obviously. And I have both the doable way and the best way to do phase 3. I have 2 videos, you know, basically 2 slightly different approaches. One is basically just more detailed, more anal, if you will. And so if you can follow that, you'll kind of know that you're doing everything in your power and that the resulting, you know, higher weight that you're getting to is most likely those glycogen stores. You know, however, if you're cheating on P3 and doing other things that, you know, or there's foods you're eating that you're technically, you know, allergic to, that's like another issue, right? Just to give you a comparison of actual fat loss, when doing the diet without fruits and doing the diet with fruits, when I compared my my weight loss and my fat loss statistics from round 4 and round 5, in the end, even though my weight loss was higher, my average was higher in round 5, or how much weight I lost, than round 4, when I actually looked at like my hydrostatic body fat tests, pretty much my amount of fat loss was about the same. If you compare it by days, my fat loss was about the same. So that kind of, again, just goes to show that even though it appeared as if I had lost more weight by removing the fruits, in the end I actually lost the same amount of fat. It's just that there was extra glycogen stores, water that was lost that I then did have to, you know, regain as soon as round 5 was over. But I knew that it doesn't always make it easy. You know, it's still, even for me, even though I know this, it still makes P3 a little rocky because, yeah, you're trying to figure out where is it that my weight is going to start staying the same. And of course, there's often more than one variable going on at the same time, which can make it hard to figure out what's going on. And so that's why I don't make light of P3. I do tell you guys, it does feel scary, and that's just how it is, unfortunately. But I do think you guys can take this knowledge and stabilize your weight wherever that may be. Maybe it's 5 pounds higher, maybe it's 7 pounds higher. The point really, though, is that, you know, as P3 wears on, you know, the first week goes by, it's going to be kind of up and down. But as you get into that second week, third week, you should start to see it be more stable. And if it's a little higher, fine. You just want to see it get stable wherever that is. Hopefully not, of course, where you started the beginning of your round. But you know, somewhere 5 pounds, even if it has to be 7 pounds, you just want to get stable. That's the whole point. I wanted to just give you guys another comparison. Out of my 4 successful rounds where I did follow P3 strictly each time, the 2 rounds that I stabilized most easily were rounds 1 and 4, and those were the 2 rounds that I did eat the fruits. Now, I never ate the Melba and everything, but I did eat the fruits on round 1 and 4, and those were the 2 rounds that I easily stabilized within the 2-pound window. Now, rounds 3 and 5, I did not eat the fruits, and as a result, it seemed a lot more rocky in P3, and my weight was, kind of seeming to fly up, which, now I know in retrospect was glycogen stores, but because then I'd be, trying to eat super clean or doing a steak day to try to get it back down, but then as soon as I ate a more normal P3 day, it would shoot right back up, and so that's where you can get into that thing where like, what's going on? Oh my gosh, this diet didn't work, or what happened, or am I going to gain all the weight back? So all those things go through your head, right? But once I realized what was going on, and for me it was easier because I was actually able to go get body fat testing done. And for any of you who are really interested in that, what you can do is just search on Google hydrostatic body fat testing plus your location or your area. Or you can search bod pod. That's another form of pretty reliable body fat testing, bod pod, plus your area. So I'll put that in the article as well if you want to check the spelling. But that's really the best way to find out if what you're doing is okay and if it's really just glycogen stores coming back or if it's actually fat. But that's basically how I was able to come to this realization with not eating the fruits and what happens in P3 as a result. So I just thought that was really interesting. And like I said, I had good reasons for not eating the fruits in P2, and I would do it again, but you guys will have to weigh that for yourselves. If you think going through what may seem a little bit rockier in P3, if it's worth it to you for the benefits that you get of not eating fruits in P2. And for me, it eliminated my sugar cravings, and that's why I did it. But again, I wouldn't recommend not eating the fruits simply to lose more weight because, again, I don't think it's really causing extra fat loss. So the reason it can sometimes be hard to know what gains are, like say using measurements, for instance, is that even glycogen stores and gaining muscle, muscle and glycogen, it does weigh something and it does take up space on your body. It's just it doesn't take up as much space on your body as fat. But when you take your measurements, you have no way of knowing if a 1-inch increase somewhere is glycogen or fat. There may be some ways, like with your waist and stuff, that would make it more obvious. But my quad muscles, I know I'm a very low body fat percent now. I'm 15%, which for a woman is really good, but I've got strong muscular thighs. They're not like really skinny. And I think probably from the end of my 3rd round, when I was just starting CrossFit, to now, I believe most likely my measurement increases on my thighs is actually larger. And I am larger in my below my bust area. When I got to the end of my 3rd and my 4th round, I was getting pretty lean here, but then now with CrossFit, we do such heavy weights and all that stuff that my lats are pretty big, and I've had to actually go up in a size just because of that added muscle. So muscle and glycogen do still take up space on your body. So, your clothes may feel different, but that doesn't mean that you've gained fat. It's just, that's kind of why for myself, I ended up using HCG to continually lose a little bit more fat in between CrossFitting up to a certain point, because I found that wow, I want to gain this much muscle, but it does take up a certain amount of space. And so if I still want to be a small size, I need to lose more fat as well. And so that's what I ended up doing with my last 2 rounds of HCG. So anyway, I hope that that helps. If you want to learn a little bit more about this, I actually got into this topic about glycogen stores and not eating the fruit on P2 and everything in one of my HCG diet interviews. It was actually episode 7 with B. So I will link to that because she did the same thing as well. So you can kind of hear her feedback and her story and how that worked for her. And hopefully in the future, I'll even do something a little more detailed when it comes to glycogen and all that stuff, because it's actually really fascinating. So essentially, in a nutshell, the thing is this. If you don't eat the fruits and melba on phase 2, be mentally prepared in your mind that your LDW is going to be artificially low, and you won't most likely be able to stabilize it within 2 pounds, and you really could be working against yourself and basically stressing out your body if you try to do that, if you keep trying to force it back over and over and over, and just kind of at some point you have to let it go, you know? So that's kind of the takeaway to get from this. So be prepared to purposefully stabilize at a higher weight and even slightly increased measurements. So if you prepare yourself in advance for that being a part of your picture, you know, if this is the way you choose to do phase 2, then you can avoid all the feelings of guilt, failure, like your body's not working, and all of that stuff, because those are the types of negative thought patterns that can cause you to actually start doing things that are bad for your body, like cheating on P3 or giving up because you're discouraged. However, if you know the reasoning behind what's happening, you can accept it, and then you can keep doing good things for your body. And you know, it's just, you know what's going on, and that it's so amazing how when you know what's happening, it gives you so much more power over what you're able to do and how positively you're able to think. So I hope that was helpful. We're gonna go on to the second video in this series, which is you're gonna possibly need to stabilize outside of that 2-pound window if you start a rigorous exercise program in phase 3. So we'll talk all about that next. And then of course the third reason has to do with if you are just doing steak day after steak day after steak day and your weight just will not stay where you were intending it to. We'll talk about that scenario and why you may just need to stabilize higher. Okay, take care guys, bye. Airplane is really slow, so it's taking forever to go away. Oh, and that's because it's carrying a Geico sign. So yeah, it wants to make sure that everybody sees that you can save money with Geico. Oh man, now some of my lipstick came off. I was just trying to be funny. Do you guys like my quilt? I made that. I used to do a lot of quilting. I don't really have too much time these days, but I love quilting. It's my little hobby, and this is one of the ones I made. It's sideways so that it's long enough so that you don't see my fence that's behind it. So that's why the hearts are sideways.